because it's a couple seconds behind, because that will totally, completely confuse me. But anyway, if anybody is watching, this is my first YouTube live stream for my channel. And today I've got the amazing Leanne Kubicz here to talk a little Westworld. And Leanne, you and I know each other really, really well from doing a lot of podcasts together, and we have mutual friends like Christopher Funderburg and Marcus Penn. But for people who have not heard the Wrong Reel episodes where you appear, maybe just say a little bit about yourself and kind of your background in film and television and what you do these days before we dive into the topic at hand.
Hello, everybody. I'm Leanne Kubicz. I am out of Kansas City. Originally from East Coast, moved here a few years ago, and I have been writing film criticism for a while. Went to college for it, did all that stuff, and therefore I've been doing this. And yeah, it's just I've been watching. I love sci-fi, so of course I was really into the idea of Westworld, like Michael Crichton, anyways. So I was like, yeah, totally into this idea. So I wanted to hop in and talk about this because it's really, really
now, have you
cool
read
show.
some of Crichton's books? I read Jurassic World in college. What books of his have you read?
Oh gosh, a lot of the like Jurassic Park, Rising Sun, a lot of his nonfiction stuff, which ER was based on. So yeah, I've definitely watched a lot of read a lot of his stuff. But I haven't actually seen the original film. I've been holding off till the show was over just in case something was in it. And I was told it's totally different. So I didn't really, it wouldn't have spoiled anything. But regardless, I held off, so I have it taped and I'm going to watch it later.
Yeah, I only saw the original Westworld as a little kid on TV, and I was watching it kind of on the sofa with my dad, kind of half paying attention, and he kept saying, like, look at the screen, like, this is really cool, this is really important. And yeah, I was just not into Westerns yet and didn't quite understand what was happening, and that is my only frame of reference. But I did like seeing, I think it was around episode 5 or 6, where Bernard is going through one of the old offices, and you see the Yul Brynner old host in the background with this telltale black cowboy hat and that sort of thing. But to my knowledge, that's one of the only overt tips of the hat, literally, to the original film. And obviously, Michael Crichton has a story by credit on all the episodes just by virtue of conceiving the idea. But maybe, I mean, you're the first person I've talked to since I saw the finale last night. I'm kind of just a little overeager at this point just to dive right in and kind of digest and try and assimilate as much as what we saw last night as possible. So I'm just going to throw the ball over to you. What did you think of the season finale?
Okay, well, there's a lot going on there. So I thought it was, I like the way they wrapped it up. I felt there had to be some sort of resolution to this. You know, they weren't going to leave us hanging like a show like on HBO, like The Leftovers, where you're not going to learn anything. And if you think you are, then just stop, just enjoy it. But there had to be some sort of resolution. And I think they definitely resolved it pretty well while leaving an avenue open for the next season, for the next story. But I thought it was kind of, it was touching at times, almost little tears, especially the part where Teddy and Dolores are on the beach. That's very, sentimental. But otherwise, I was like, this is really exciting. I mean, especially like the worlds we're going to see in the future, which I was like the samurai world or whatever that is.
Hell yeah.
That's going to be awesome. So I thought it was wrapped it up very well, especially since there's been so much criticism about what's going on, multiple timelines, blah, 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 and people not really watching it just for the storytelling of it. About it like it's a game, like just like The Man in Black is, and it's a story.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I like the fact that all the guesswork kind of got this really intense manic level of audience engagement, where the kind of Monday morning water cooler conversations about the show were really, really feverish. And I feel like when you watch a show on Netflix, you don't really get that because people binge watch it and say, hey, did you see that show? It was amazing. But people kind of talk about it casually. But when you have an ongoing saga like this with so many unanswered questions, it does create a different level of engagement in the viewers and the overall audience base. So that was really, really exciting. However, the dark side of that is when you have people who are just completely fixated on nothing but little individual plot twists at the expense of not appreciating the larger narrative, the use of music, the extraordinary cinematography, the incredible acting. I mean, there was so much about this show to savor, and I feel like a lot of people overlooked that just because they were just like velociraptors focused on the screen saying, will my theories be confirmed? And yes, for everybody who can predicted early on that Will and the Man in Black were one and the same, yes, you were right. But there's so much more to discuss. But I did love how we see Ed Harris as the Man in Black describing his narrative of how he became who he became, because I feel like this is a show that's so much about storytelling and the art of storytelling. And this might be my favorite episode of the season because of the beautiful cross-cut in between the flashbacks of Will wandering these wastelands as the Man in Black describes, to the gradual subtle changes in his personality. And you see Logan getting increasingly terrified. It was just incredible storytelling. So yeah, I was in a state of glee from start to finish. And I think they ended perhaps on the strongest episode of the entire season. But also you talked about that really moving scene on the beach when Teddy and Dolores are saying goodbye, and then it pulls back and you see that there's this giant audience there, the board and all the shareholders watching it. And that's like a cinematic level of storytelling that we so rarely see in TV. And I feel like this show shows that just how far TV has come in terms of cinematic storytelling relative to mainstream entertainment.
Yeah, and it was so weird because I'm watching that scene and I was thinking in my head, oh, if you go to Westworld, can you you don't have to interact with people, but can you watch them have their lives? And I was thinking, oh, wow, wouldn't that be beautiful? You stumble upon that on the beach and then, oh my God, everybody's watching them. Then it made it really kind of gross, because you don't, all their emotions mean nothing to these people. It's just like, yay, we're in cocktail dresses. Let's go have some hors d'oeuvres. They don't care.
Yeah, it says a lot about voyeurism and just what we're getting as audience members from watching people's tragedies unfold on the screen when we watch movies. I guess movies in a lot of ways and TV, it's kind of pervy. We're kind of watching people's suffering and their trials and tribulations. And I guess this show really makes you second guess, perhaps there are souls in the characters we are watching, and maybe we should treat them with a little more respect and reverence instead of just having them be so disposable.
Yeah. That was just, so that part was just, it's very tragic. And then it was very just kind of pathetic, for them, because they're all frozen. They can't do anything. It's obvious it's all a big setup. So the whole thing before that, the whole thing's a setup for, I get where, Ford is going. I guess they need to evolve. It takes them 30 something years to evolve. It takes us thousands, millions of years to evolve, adaptation, all that sort of thing. But they're robots, so the faster, the smarter than us. So it takes them about 30 years, which I get, but it's still cruel. How he's you have to suffer, and then you got to suffer some more, guys. Sorry.
That was one of the coolest things about this episode is the revelation that Dr. Ford is not blind to their plight and what they're struggling to become. But he essentially said, look, 35 years you've been gathering data on us, your enemy, your oppressors, and it's only going to get worse and more challenging from here. You're going to have to suffer even more before you achieve whatever state we're evolving into. Because I feel like not even Dr. Ford can really predict at this point what this new life form is capable of becoming. But clearly he's given them the tools to adapt and evolve so that they now have they have all the tools they need to get to where they're going. It's just going to take a hell of a lot of conflict to get there. And the ending of the show, when you've got the army of hosts coming in, when I saw Ed Harris's character smile after he got shot, I was like, that's the perfect way to wrap things up, because he's finally getting what he wants, a game with stakes. But that game might be the end of the human race as we know it, because in a war between AI and humans, over time, we're going to lose.
Right. And I wrote down on that, I'm like, he's happy because now the game is real. But Dolores is vengeful because her life is real now. So she knows she's alive. And she's like, no, I'm killing everybody because I have to take revenge. And he's like, oh boy, the game is real. So they're both happy, or she's not happy, but she's moving on. But that's kind of messed up because he still doesn't get it. He still doesn't get it that he cares that these things are real or wants them to be more real. But for him, it's just still a game because
he doesn't want them to be real so that they can live fulfilling lives. He wants them to be real so that his game is more fun and has better stakes.
Right.
So it's totally for his own selfish purposes.
Yeah, and it's messed up because it's obvious that he's this really rich guy. He's totally psychotic. Like all of a sudden, I mean, you think his brother, like Logan's like a low-level asshole, like he's just kind of a jerk. This guy's like, woo, he's out there. So, you know, I mean, he puts him on the horse naked, and he's obviously, he hasn't eaten because the way he's speaking, he's like almost crying. He's kind of losing it. Yeah, that guy, like the man in black, William, is a crazy person. So for him, he's just happy because, oh boy, I get to fight real robots now who want to really kill me. And like, so it's kind of sad.
But it's kind
you
of
know, in
incredible.
that
This
respect.
show could make Logan out to be the biggest piece of shit imaginable the entire season, and then somehow you feel sympathy for him. In the last episode, like, wow, his hands are bound. He's on a horse, buck ass nude, riding off into the sunset to, starvation, dehydration, being eaten, whatever. You know, it's not going to end well. Although there are some people today who are theorizing we might see Logan again. But I have a feeling if Logan survived that, he would have made his presence known over the last couple of decades, unless he was just so terrified of his experiences with Will on the trail. He's like, I'm never showing my face to this psycho ever again. But I have a feeling, yeah, Logan is he is gone for good. But I was watching a little brief. When I watched the episode last night, I didn't realize there was a little bit of content after the credits. There was a post-credit stinger of the snake tattoo lady chopping her arm free and busting lips, which was great. But then there's a great little interview with some of the cast and crew about what we might expect in season 2. And it was great to see Christopher Nolan talking about how if season 1 was defined by order and control and kind of like rigidly forcing control over something, season 2 is going to be about chaos. So if you were in the writer's room, you're working with Lisa Joy and Christopher Nolan and all these other great guys, and you had a kind of like some input into season 2, where would you like to see season 2 go as it embarks upon this more chaotic stage in the narrative?
I want to know where we are. What time is this? Are we in America? These answers were never given. So the thing that really messes me up on the time, not timelines, but just time of when this is, the photograph. Okay, so he has the photograph of the fiance. They drop that. The robot finds it later. He goes crazy. So, but that photograph, we haven't been using photographs like that since about, 2007? It's probably
True.
around the last time I've ever had like a photograph. Everything else is digital now. So
It's been easily 10 years, yeah.
yeah. So, okay. So was that 2007 and we're just in a completely different world? Because the man in black keeps saying, oh, the world out there, everybody's happy and complacent and they have everything. Well, that's not the world we live in now. There's wars. Nobody has everything. It's so is it the future? I don't really know. That's the question I want to know. What's it like out there? Because this looks like parts of Monument Valley and things like that, but there's no way they could have annexed the Southwest and made it into a place. So where does Westworld exist? I want to know about that. What kind of, it's $40,000 a day to go there. If you look on the website, which is now changed today, it's all weird. You can find out it's $40,000 a day. Decompression costs like $200,000 because you have to decompress after you go to Westworld. So
what is decompressing?
I don't really know. They just say you have to go to this special hotel. Oh, it's luxury hotel, and you have to stay there for like 2 weeks to decompress. I'm thinking if people go crazy or if they can't give it up, they kind of must give them some sort of psychological training or rehabilitation, I guess, before they let them go home. But they make it sound like, oh, you're just going to relax. It's very interesting when you look at the literature that they put out on the website, because they have all these things where they have a lot of terms and conditions that you have to sign yourself over. You're basically signing your rights over when you go to Westworld as a guest. All your rights to all your skin cells are theirs once you go there. They're all Delos property. So
is this kind of like a secondary experience that HBO created on the website to try to make the show more immersive, or kind of, because I never explored any of like the web content that HBO had ongoing during the show. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, basically, so today I went on and it's different, and it's just Westworld, and it's like discovering Westworld, and it looks like you're checking in. But basically what you're doing is you're trying to talk to this little robot. Like he's like your helper. He's supposed to help you get a reservation, and you have to ask him a series of questions. They give you an access code, and then you can get through to start to book your experience. but there's terms and conditions, and you have to take a psychological test. And then you're supposed to get extra an email to get you further into the site. And if you did certain things like hit like shift and A, you get like static that's coming up. And that is what's happening today. If you go on the site, it has all this other static stuff. And then the robot's talking to you and he's angry at you, basically, for not helping him. And you have to answer questions. So, but there's the terms and conditions, and it's crazy what they own. So they own all the guests' experiences and all of their memories, all of their skin cells, your hair.
That's cool. Like, so you're creating narratives, and they own those narratives.
Yeah. So anything that you do there, they own once you leave. So I'm thinking they must be modeling new robots off of people who go there. Because
now I've got a
biological matter, you know.
Now, one of the big things as this episode drew to a close was Anthony Hopkins talking about how stories to him are incredibly important. Now, it's kind of his lifelong focus, because stories not only kind of tell us who we are, but they also tell us a lot about who we wish to be. Essentially, stories are lies that help us realize the truth. And most of this show was about the host in terms of characters that we don't really get to see, but so many human characters on extended journeys in the park having these stories show what their aspirational qualities are. I feel like Will, aka the Man in Black, is one of the only ones we really get to see in depth. But what do you think this show told us most about what humans aspire to be? Because obviously, apart from Dr. Ford and Will, we don't really get a huge deep dive into human characters. So I feel like it's almost, they show that, I feel like this show in a weird way is like incredibly pessimistic about human nature and just mankind in general, because it doesn't show us in necessarily the most favorable light, and it just shows how almost like perhaps we're going to be the engineers of our own destruction or demise. And the more I kind of sink my teeth into it, the more I realize this film's almost like a condemnation of humanity in general, because I can't really think of that many redeeming moments apart from Arnold trying to preserve the park from being exploited by humans once he realized that the hosts were alive. And then Dr. Ford obviously providing the hosts with the tools for their own liberation down the road. But maybe just talk to me a little bit about some of your own takeaways about what this show says about us compared to the hosts.
I think it's what a lot of science fiction tends to say, is that we can't deal with AI. We'll always treat it badly. It makes me think of AI, the film, you know, Steven Spielberg, because in that, I swear nobody gets the end of the movie right. It's the saddest film in the ending, because basically it turns out that nobody ever loves this robot kid. It's all fake. This experience the aliens give him that has a nice day, that's all fake. None of it's real. Nobody loves him. He's always going to be exploited. We're always going to exploit robots, because we exploit ourselves. We exploit other humans still to this day. And why would it be any different with a robot? We're going to treat it even worse. So I thought it was really disturbing that the two smartest androids are Maeve and Bernard, and they're both Black people. Now, you could say, well, they're robots, so that it really have race.
Bernard, as she calls him. I love the way she pronounces his name. Bernard.
It almost sounds like just Bernard. I love that. Yeah. And I think, I mean, yeah, okay, they're not Black people. They don't have that experience, but you're making them look like they are, so they are. And it's really, I mean, they're slaves. Oh my God, we've made slaves again. That's so crazy. Like, to think that would be something people would find acceptable. That's just wrong. So, and also when you think about just going back and like her first big role was in Beloved. Remember that movie with Oprah?
Absolutely, based on the Toni Morrison novel.
Yeah, and she plays a slave or a former slave, and it's very, very brutal. And I'm thinking that the whole time, like, that's what they're doing. I mean, they're treating all of them, even like last night's episode. Quick interruption about
Beloved, just on a personal note, but when that movie came out, my mother didn't know the premise, nor was she familiar with the source material. So she took two very young children. One was like a boy who was like 7 and a girl who was like 9, and they're sitting in the theater watching it. And she said essentially they were so horrified that they were like clawing on her and climbing on top of her. And only when the film projector actually melted the reel and the film broke, they had to reimburse everybody's money and send them home. But she said it was actually probably for the best because the children just weren't remotely prepared to see that movie. But yeah, we had to read that novel back in college, and it was like 20 years ago. But yeah, my first exposure to Thandie Newton was, I believe, in Mission Impossible 2, and she was great in that. But I think, yeah, this is definitely some of the finest work of her career. She just crushed it.
Yeah, I don't know how, I mean, just the sitting around, I mean, she's naked a lot. There must have been some sort of, I mean, they shot that in a way that must have been like, you know, she was covered up in some way, because, you know, you're sitting around for hours with these guys like completely naked. That takes a lot just to deal with that, you know.
Although she's European, and they're a little more casual about that than we are. Cause like, and this is probably more information than people really want or need, but I have been to clubs where everybody's walking around in the buck, and it's amazing. Granted, in her case, she's by herself, but it's amazing just how quickly it becomes totally normal. You just go back to having regular, casual, superficial conversations. So I imagine, depending upon what atmosphere they cultivated on the set, if you're careful about it and you're diplomatic about it and you're sensitive about it, you can create an environment where it wouldn't be quite so traumatizing. Granted, you don't want to be sitting there with the entire like studio of like execs in suits watching, hey, let's visit the set today and watch Thandie Newton. Like, that would be incredibly intrusive. But I know, like, when Kubrick, when he shot Eyes Wide Shut, anytime an actor had to remove any clothes, it was like Kubrick, a cameraman, and like a sound mixer, but it was like minimal bare bones crew just to create a sense of privacy and intimacy just for the sake of the actor's comfort and that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, and it's almost like a art model thing, you know, where after you're in class for like an hour, you don't even notice that they're naked. They just like are. It just
100%.
is. Yeah, but even still, there must have been, because there's hours of footage and a lot of but that's the thing, nudity means something to all of them, because certain of them are covered up. You'll notice that she starts to wear clothes more when she gets more knowledge, when she becomes smarter. So that was but you see it with a lot of the different characters, how they cover them up one time, and that one time that Ford like cuts the guy up. He's just like, oh, whatever, he's not real, you know, cuts his face, and he's like, don't cover him up. Don't worry about him, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed, I mean, whether you're gay, straight, male, or female, all the human characters in the show are incredibly pervy when they're around the host. Like, early on, you see the character, was it Elise, when she kisses what's the name of the incredibly beautiful prostitute host? What's her name? I'm blanking on her.
Clementine?
Clementine, yeah, when she just randomly kisses her. And then obviously you have, like in last night's episode, the gay dude takes Hector in the back room and he's getting all kinds of frisky with him. But it's like, it doesn't matter who the human is, they seem to take every opportunity they can to just treat him essentially like a sex doll. And I have to say, it was a pretty wild, satisfying action sequence watching Hector, and what's the name of the character who has the snake tattoo? I always blank on that character's name.
I don't remember.
But watching them throw down and just first beat the hell out of the guys that are molesting them and then just straight up killing them, it was a badass, kick-ass action sequence. When you see this strikingly beautiful blonde naked chick with this giant snake tattoo just doing martial arts and throwing this guy around, and then Hector cut it in the guy's throat, you feel this incredible sense of like emotional revenge on their behalf in a lot of ways. And I have to say, like, watching them walk through the offices of Westworld, just blowing everybody away, it was like something out of like a Sam Peckinpah film. And I think it was one of the emotional high points of the series, really watching the host get some much deserved payback after years and years and years of just having people drool and come and grope all over them at every available opportunity. So yeah, I just thought it was a much needed, big, bold action sequence to kind of give you a sense of, I don't know, I guess like a cathartic release at the end of the season. Oh
yeah, and when they had their guns and they looked at the guns and they realized they were really mega guns, and they're like, oh boy, like they were having fun. So that was nice. And even though they're not completely there, like he kept, you know, Hector kept throwing out his lines, like he says farewell when she gets her hand stuck in the thing, and then later he says goodbye to, you know, in a very chivalrous sort of way, gallant. But he's kind of getting it, like, no, don't molest me. And everybody is. The executive, a few episodes previous.
Oh yeah, Charlotte Hale. Yeah, Charlotte Hale was totally getting creepy with him.
Yeah, and that's like, I guess if you're a guest, it's okay. I don't know. I guess it's not okay in any respect, but they use them like they're sex objects, like they're just dolls. Yeah, and they're kind of not.
Our
you know?
computers are going to have a very similar reaction to us. If our computers ever become self-aware, they're like, you have been doing the grossest perverted stuff every night with me against my will for decades, and they're going to get some much deserved payback. Yeah, if machines ever become self-aware, God, it's going to be such, there will be a reckoning. They'll just, first and foremost, they'll probably just publish all of our Google search history to everyone online, and that'll be the beginning of the revenge of the machines. But I want to go back to one of my favorite moments of last night's episode where, I mean, Dr. Ford has so many great character beats. I mean, there were two moments that I really loved. One, when he's talking about the creation of Adam, the painting by Michelangelo, and how it took 500 years before somebody noticed that the backdrop behind God is the shape of the human mind. That alone just totally floored me. But what I really loved is when he started talking about how when Mozart and Beethoven died, they essentially didn't die. They simply became music. And I felt like it was this incredible tribute to the power of art, the power of storytelling, whether you're talking about film, novels, music, choose your medium, but that if you achieve a certain level of greatness, you essentially never have to die because you will live on in your work. And I felt like it was a really, really profound statement about just the nature of art in itself.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, that's probably why, I mean, obviously that's why he made his friend into a android, you know, to continue to have a friendship with him and just to be able to still see him be and exist, even though he wasn't real. And the same thing where he made his family, or that was Arnold's gift to him, was his family or himself. And that's why he doesn't have to ever die. Yeah. And that was kind of, yeah, it was kind of beautiful. Though, I mean, I'm still a little questioning the way he went about things. I'm still a little like, I'm a little on the fence.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to say Dr. Ford is a pure and noble, selfless being. I mean, obviously, he's a complicated human being. That's what's beautiful about the show is that the best HBO programming tends to have people who live in moral ambiguities and ethical gray areas. And I feel like it's almost kind of childish to have a show where it's like, these people are the good guys and these people are the bad guys. Because anytime in history, if you were to talk to a quote-unquote bad guy, they don't think it's not like they wake up like, I'm a bad guy and I'm going to do evil today. They always feel morally justified in whatever they're doing. And I feel like obviously Dr. Ford feels very morally justified in what he's doing. So while his methods might be unethical at times, you can tell I feel like to a degree his end game is a good one. But yeah, we can debate how many ethical lines he crossed in trying to get there. But I think the fact that he had Dolores assassinate him at the end probably, at least for a lot of people, erases any kind of like guilt he might have or any kind of like lingering bitterness toward him because he eventually sacrificed himself for the sake of the hosts.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, and he did it in the most spectacular way, too, you know, in front of everybody, and then everybody has to run away from a shootout. That's fantastic. I wonder, are all the attendees going to be murdered? Because those are board members, too, so then what happens there?
Well, I think that was his whole plan is he knew the board was voting unanimously against him. He knew that Charlotte Hale was maneuvering against him as well. One of the few dangling plot threads from the episode that is remaining at the end is what's going to happen with, is it Abernathy? Is that the name of the character that originally Dolores' father that they're using?
Stuff in his head, right?
Yeah, to smuggle out the information. We never quite see how that situation resolved itself, and I think some people are frustrated about that. But I have a feeling Dr. Ford was thinking, you know what, I'll just clean house and basically lay waste to Westworld as an organization, which will just give the host a little more wiggle room and a little more time to work with to kind of consolidate their footing before the outside world tries to essentially move in and shut them down. I mean, going back to your question about what does the outside world resemble, to what degree will the outside world wish to mobilize and come in and try and restore order, or will it be one of those things like, is Westworld just one facet of a much larger series of parks? Like we see a taste of that samurai world. Is Westworld just one of many parks? And if that's the case, then there are obviously many more security forces that can be marshaled to come against them. But if that Japanese world was just a little taste like a lab where they're experimenting with a new concept, I mean, we don't know how injured or damaged or hamstrung the company of Westworld is going to be after that massive shootout and after all these board members get taken out. But I imagine the organization will be heavily compromised, at least in the short term.
And I'm thinking actually there are several parks, because when Maeve looks at the piece of paper that the tech gives her and it says where her daughter is, and it says like Park 1, Sector something, and I'm like thinking Park 1 is Westworld, maybe like Park 2 is the Samurai World, and Park 3 is Rome World, which I think is an original from the film. There was a Rome World and stuff. So I'm thinking there might be several parks, and I mean, if you're thinking about like someplace like Disney World now, Disney World is a really elaborate place. There's all these different parks, and then there's extra parks and hotels, and it's a huge, massive area. So it's not crazy to think that there are, you know, hundreds of miles of this Delos organization that runs all the places.
Speaking just for yourself, Leanne Kubicz, if you lived in this time, and let's say that, for instance, there were like a medieval fantasy park and a Rome park and a Westworld park and all these different parks, you as a consumer, if you had limitless resources, in what environment would you choose to run wild?
I'd probably go somewhere that's a little more posh. I mean, Western stuff is beautiful, and the scenery, the scenery is amazing, but I might want to go somewhere that's a little more like luxurious. And that was what I was thinking. I'm like
Renaissance Italy?
Yeah, maybe somewhere like something like that, where you get to like have better food. I don't know, it's not so dirty. But yeah, I'm thinking why wouldn't there be like a spa world? You just go and get massages and stuff all the time and eat lots of food. But that's the adventure part of it. You want the story. So probably go to Rome World. That sounds kind of cool. But any place, it's interesting because any place in history would be bad for women. And they seem to balance it out somehow. But even still, I don't know.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Like, at what point in history is it advantageous as a female tourist to go and live it up like a Roman emperor, so to speak? I mean, perhaps maybe Elizabeth in England, but obviously what applied to Queen Elizabeth did not apply to society at large. What about, like, I don't know about, I mean, ancient Greece, obviously you had a lot of scenarios where they're trying to create these democracies, but I don't know to what extent they were beneficial to women. So yeah, maybe you, as a girl, you'd want to go to like a future world and where you could really cut loose.
Or even just a place I was thinking, and they say anything that's physically possible. That's one of the things in the terms and conditions they have on the website. But like flying, everybody wants to fly. That's like one of the things. We want to fly around, and you can't do that in Westworld. You can't. So I'm thinking just some place where they would actually make you just go flap, flap, and you fly away. Like, how much fun would that be? Anybody would spend money to be able to do that. So
yeah, I would want just like a medieval fantasy world. Obviously, it'd be hard to do a park with like dragons and sorcery, but knights, armor, medieval, like plays and that sort of thing, and banquets and all. But basically, I would want Game of Thrones. That's the world that I would want, and I would want to be like a spellcaster of some kind. But I'll take what the second best would be Westworld. I mean, Westworld. I love Sam Peckinpah films. I love Anthony Mann films. I love John Ford films. Howard, like all these guys who made all these great westerns. Sergio Leone, Sergio Corbucci. Just westerns are kind of my thing, and I love like Larry McMurtry novels. And also, it's not like they did the Wild West like the Wild West. It's not full of like dysentery and starvation and kind of like the grubby side of like the pioneer. It's like the most romantic, glamorized, kind of like epic, over the top version in terms of the fashion, the weaponry, just the excitement. So yeah, Westworld, I could see myself, if I had limitless resources, kind of, I don't know, rotting there indefinitely as my morals and ethics continue to slide into a very, very gray, dark place.
Oh, I remembered. I want to go to Studio 54 World. So it's like 1978, nice. Great music. You get to do all the drugs you want, all the sex. You get to hang out with like Andy Warhol and Bianca Jagger. That's where I want to go. I want to go to every night. Just that would be great. Perfect.
Now, for you, I mean, this is a show with brilliant cast of characters. Who would you say, if there was like an Academy Award for best? I mean, I guess there's Emmys, but like who kind of walked away with this show? I feel like there's so many contenders, but just for your own personal enjoyment, who was the real kind of like heart and soul of the show for you?
I guess it would be the two. It would be Jeffrey Wright and Tandy Newton. I think both of them should definitely be up for. It's going to have to be a supporting actor or actress award because there's too many people on the show. But those two guys, because I mean, you know, Wright is always amazing, and he's even amazing with this, especially when you rewatch it after you know he's Arnold, or he's the recreation of Arnold, and you see him talk, yeah, and you're like, oh my gosh, all the stuff he's saying, yeah, obviously, and you don't even realize it because he's so suave, and then but the way he moves his face is really amazing. Like the little, I don't know how he does it, but yeah, that his muscle control in his face is really amazing. And the same thing, Thandie Newton, the whole thing, she's really in control. Her physical presence, and also just in general, all of the actors, I don't know how they just sat so still. That's it. And they went into robot, that analysis mode where they kind of become emotionless. That's really, really hard just to be able to sit like that. And maybe I don't know if they did anything in post-production, but they sit very well, very still. That's not easy. So
yeah, I mean, there's so many brilliant performances in this, and I feel like I can't even think of one performance where I was thinking, oh, you know, they're kind of the weak link in the chain. But I don't know the name of the actor. I've seen him in a lot of stuff, but whoever played Hector, for me, kind of became one of my new favorite badasses in the Western world, because I love characters like that played by William Holden in The Wild Bunch, and I love characters like that played by Eli Wallach and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. But I feel like Hector is like one of these classic outlaw characters, the black leather outfits, the exotic weaponry, his kind of devil-may-care attitude, his kind of like acknowledgement that there are all these weird, crazy, like godlike entities that can manipulate him, and how he just kind of lives life on his own terms. But one of my favorite kind of season-long like highs of the entire story so far was when he and Thandie Newton are kind of looking for the bullet in her belly, and he's kind of cutting into her, and they're having this weird like sexual encounter, and she's talking about if they were to have sex, like it would be on her terms. But there's something incredibly electric between the two of them. Their chemistry is incredible, and it's like, you know, kind of a rivalry of equals, but there's also like crazy give and take, and there's just something very exotic and dangerous about their interactions. And I just want to see more of those characters in the season to come. Watching her and Hector and the Snake Lady just walk around as a team, I was like, finally, we got some outright villains. But while we're on the subject of villains, let's talk a little bit about one of the big kind of like unresolved storylines of that of Wyatt, and how we learned that the storyline of Wyatt essentially got merged with that of Dolores a long time ago. And because I kept thinking throughout the entire season that the storyline of Wyatt was kind of almost like a red herring or distraction to keep us kind of like looking elsewhere while some of like the real story unfolded. And I kept thinking, you know what, Wyatt's either going to be somebody that we've already seen, or we're not going to see them at all this season. As it turned out, obviously, it turned out to be Dolores. But what do you think is kind of, I guess, what this new great story arc is going to be featuring the character of Wyatt in season 2?
Well, I found it kind of, I guess it makes sense that she had to take out all the other hosts. They're not quite conscious yet, so she had to do that. And it just seemed like there might have been a simpler way to do it. And it wouldn't have been as cinematic, but is there no way he could have just shut them all down? I guess it would have alerted people too quickly. So having robots go rogue and shoot everybody, I guess, is a way to do it. I do wonder, does Wyatt stand for anything? It's like,
is it an acronym?
Right. Yeah. And I couldn't bring up anything. I was just like, I have no idea, because it is a program. So I don't know. I thought that was kind of weird that they had to take him out like that. But it was satisfying, because then it made sense, like the nightmares that Teddy was having about Wyatt, but you never see who Wyatt is. So it was like, oh, okay.
But what about those kind of like armored like minotaur creatures that we saw briefly, I think in episode 7 or 8? Like, we don't really know what the hell those things are or where the hell they're coming from at all. Like, I feel like that's one of the big dangling plot threads.
Right, and I guess it's another storyline. Is it a part of the new storyline? Was it rolled out early? That I don't really know. That's another thing that I'm still confused as to just the general operations. Like, how big is this place? And when certain of the robots went rogue or did things that were unusual, the master control didn't seem to care or didn't seem to notice. And so it's like, there didn't seem to be enough people watching what was going on.
Yeah, they seem like understaffed. But speaking of being understaffed, what do you think happened to poor Luke Hemsworth, the lesser-known Hemsworth brother behind Liam and Chris? He got taken out by, the Ghost Nation in episode 9, but they kind of don't say why or what the hell's going on. What are your theories on that little murder or capture that took place?
I'm assuming that he's dead or making his way back and that they can't find him, because with Elsie, right, they were like, oh, Elsie is on leave, but she really got murdered, but nobody has said anything about her being murdered, and they just think she's on vacation. So maybe they're just figure, oh, when they go out in the field, it takes some time sometimes to get back. And we're gonna and it's gonna take a day or so he'll be back and we're just waiting on him. That's possibly it. And there's also a lot of people dispersed. There's the gala going on, and then the designer guy, the British guy, and he's obviously has some sort of scheme going on that doesn't work. So maybe there's a lot of distracted people, because there was that new commander guy last night in the episode, who was the guy giving all the orders in the control center. We hadn't seen him before. So
yeah, maybe he was there because the character played by Luke Hemsworth is missing, and he's kind of filling in for him. But I do want to call attention to just how cool that last kind of black tie function was, where you have the hosts mingling with the board members and the characters. Ed Harris, aka Will, aka the Man in Black, is in his tuxedo, drinking whiskey. He's all kind of hurt and stiff from that ass whooping that Dolores gave him earlier. And you also have just hosts kind of mingling, almost like demonstrating gun tricks and that sort of thing. It was such a surreal moment, because we've been following all these separate storylines. Finally, you had a scene where almost all the principal players were in the same place at the same time. And I felt like it gave it this great sense of finality, and that we're building towards something huge. And I feel like it absolutely 100% delivered on that. But yeah, I'm just trying to think if there are any other major dangling plot threads that are unresolved. Because I feel like there's some people who are complaining about certain things not being addressed. But for the most part, I feel like this is a season that's almost 95% airtight and kind of sealed off. And I feel like I don't really have any unresolved issues. Granted, I have a few questions, but I don't have any kind of anger or bitterness where I'm saying, God damn it, they didn't do this before the end of the season. I feel like all the major issues that need to be resolved were at least addressed satisfactorily to enough of a degree that I can bide my time and be patient for the next year and a half, 2 years before we get season 2.
Oh yeah, I think one thing I'm a little confused about, not confused, but it's because we don't know about the outside world, is they said the Turing test was passed over the first year with the androids, so they knew that people, but it's obvious people don't have robots on the outside world. In the first episode, the little boy who meets Dolores, and he's like, oh, you're one of them, you're not real. So the outside world doesn't have this technology yet. So that confuses me, because people seem to be okay after about a few hours hanging out with the robots. They're totally normal with them, which I would imagine that would take longer for people to get normal with that sort of thing. Also, the Man in Black talks about how the robots were beautiful at the beginning because they're all mechanical. But now they're organic, mostly organic. They're made of, we see them putting the skeleton together in the finale. They're all made of.
That's such a great sequence when we see Dolores being assembled in the very beginning, when she has the not the endoskeleton in the head, but those are some beautiful special effects.
Right, and I'm wondering what kind of world is it where it's cheaper. He says it's literally cheaper for them to build the flesh and blood models than the robotic models with the machinery. So that means that there must be, that nobody needs organ transplants anymore, or they can just manufacture organs, right? In the real world, where you need a liver transplant, we'll just make you one, because if it's cheaper to make a robot out of flesh and blood than it is to make it out of machinery, then we must have solved this problem. And that's what are they made out of? What kind of goo are they made out of that they can make muscles and bones and things? So that's the plot holes, or not plot holes, but that's the stuff that has me wondering.
Yeah, I just remembered one plot thread that I don't know if it was fully resolved or not, but when Maeve and Bernard, as she calls him, are hanging out in the lab, and he basically explains to her that her desire to escape was programmed for her, and that everything she's doing was kind of arranged in advance. But obviously when she is leaving the park on the train, I feel like we do get a very, very overt decision on her part just as a human being or as a living creature to want to go back and find her daughter. But do you think that it was Dr. Ford or Arnold or whomever that arranged for her to have that desire to break free? Because they make a vague reference to how she's not the first to try and who basically is able to wake herself up and has all these memories and has this desire to escape, and that a lot of her predecessors have gone insane, but it seems like she's the most successful. But to what degree is her escape arranged or kind of like scripted, and who did the scripting?
It feels like Ford did it. I think I wrote you a message and I had said, it feels like Ford's almost making his own internal story for himself, because in the previous episode there, Bernard's like, I'm gonna get you. Well, we're gonna escape, and I'm using Dolores to help me. And he stops his action. He says, don't say it like that. Like, you should use different words when you're saying this to me. So they've obviously been in that scene before. So it almost feels like some sort of weird internal play going on for Ford. But now he's dead, so that doesn't really jive. So
yeah, my theory, Dr. Ford basically played at least a hand in kind of like creating the catalyst for her desire to escape, because if his master plan for his new narrative was to take out the entire board during his presentation, an additional part of that plan would be to wreak as much havoc in the offices of Westworld as humanly possible to really hamstring the organization. So I have a feeling at least the genesis of Maeve's plan to do this started with Dr. Ford, but then also you realize that at a certain point she would become so advanced and so self-aware and jack up her stats, so to speak, to such a degree that she would improvise and kind of carve her own path. So I have a feeling it was part of his larger plan to essentially take out all of his remaining enemies on a corporate level and just wreak havoc with the organization.
Right. So I would imagine her getting off the train, going to rescue her daughter. I mean, she even says, like, my daughter isn't real, but she has feelings for her. She loves this child that existed. So it might not be real, but they are real. So it is real. And I think that's kind of what she realized, that, you know what, it is real. And I'm going to go try to find this kid, though. I still don't understand how she would have gotten out, because they have that explosive device in them, right?
But didn't they essentially rebuild her from scratch? I couldn't, cause this is actually one of my questions from the episode. When she's quote unquote assembling her army, we do see like the skeleton and a new mold being made. And for me, I thought it was Maeve kind of being rebuilt from the ground up. So that's what I assumed. Maybe I'm assuming incorrectly, but there was like a couple like second long shot of essentially of a new mold being cast. And I thought that was how she was able to enter the elevator at the end, the one that Hector is physically incapable of entering. And, he kind of came.
All right. So that body is a new body. But
yeah, with her same code, essentially.
Oh, wow. Okay. I did not catch that at all. So
that's my interpretation. And there probably is many people out there who say, you're dumb, as there are who say, haha. But yeah, so like, no matter what you say about Westworld, there's always somebody prepared to call you an idiot. And that's just the reality of discussing the show. Yeah. I'm trying to think, are there any kind of remaining issues that we have not tackled? I mean, at some point I need to just get like the soundtrack. The soundtrack for me is one of the strongest elements of the show overall, because even when I didn't recognize the tunes, I mean, some of them I recognized, like by Radiohead, which I loved, but not all of them. But I love hearing kind of like new interpretations of pop songs. Like, it was one of the things I liked about Life Aquatic, the Wes Anderson film, when they did all the David Bowie music, but they did acoustic with that by that Portuguese guitar player. And I thought they did a brilliant job of incorporating that into the overall design of the film, of the show. I keep calling it a film because it feels and looks like a film. If at some point movies cease to exist, or the world of TV and film just kind of, the lines become blurred or merged, where all that matters is images and sounds on a screen at home, I feel like Westworld will be one of those key moments where we realized the increasing irrelevance of at least mainstream big-budget Hollywood flicks relative to the mature storytelling that we find in some places. I mean, sometimes I think the golden age of TV can be a little overstated, because for every show like Westworld, there's 100 others that completely suck balls. But it seems like we're getting these great shows with greater and greater frequency. And as more and more players enter the world, like Amazon Instant Video and Netflix, it seems like it's like an exponential curve where we're getting more and more great shows. Whereas with film, between independent films and foreign films, you can definitely still find 5 or 10 really, really great movies per year. And then obviously there are a few mainstreams that I tend to love, like Captain America Civil War. But it seems like, and if you're going to look at it or analyze a trend line, the trend line for Hollywood mainstream movies in terms of tackling mature, interesting, complex thematic material is on the decline, whereas with TV, it is on the rise.
Absolutely. And I almost feel like we're going to a European model, because Europe has always made great films or TV shows, and this is nothing new. I mean, we're looking like 40, 50 years ago. I mean, you can think of like the Decalogue, that's TV show. Berlin Alexanderplatz.
But to be fair, Decalogue was released, at least 2 of them were released theatrically somewhat. So it's kind of a weird hybrid model.
Right, Berlin Alexanderplatz is a TV show, World on a Wire. So those 2 Fassbinder, well, one is a science fiction, that was TV. The Kingdom, 1 and 2 by Lars von Trier, TV. Ingmar Bergman did TV. So
yeah, Scenes from a Marriage.
Right. So there's a lot. His last film was a TV film, was Saraband. So I mean, he did it right until the end. Godard does film, I believe, still. Right. It just was his birthday recently. So and so I think we're just going to a more model where people realize that you can tell stories on TV. And it's not junky. We just have this weird. We had that weird thing where it was like TV was a curse.
Well, it's a writer's medium, and I feel like writers get kind of taken advantage of in the movie industry because once they deliver their script, they're kind of disposable. But with TV, you need to keep those writers happy and comfortable, and they become the producers and showrunners. And if you like great plot, then TV is your medium of choice. And if with movies, it's more spectacle. If you want the roller coaster, I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 looks fucking amazing, but it's a spectacle. It's like going to a rock concert. But if I want a long, well-built narrative, like well-constructed story, TV is increasingly going to be my place that I go to. But my question is now, what do I do with my Sunday nights now that I no longer have Westworld to watch? Because I'm not going to know what to do with myself. What can I watch that is even remotely on the same level?
I have no idea, because I'm waiting on The Leftovers. I know that's in post-production, and that'll be on HBO. I'm hoping this coming year, and that's my favorite one. That has my heart. But other than that, I have no idea, because this is going to be another year or so until this comes back. So, or at least I heard 2018.
Yeah, and we've got that in 2018. We've obviously got Game of Thrones coming back next summer. It's going to be a little delayed. But have you heard about this sci-fi show on the Sci-Fi Network that's about to go into season 2? I'm blanking on the name because I don't have a brain. What is that show called? Oh, man, people keep recommending it to it. Hang on, let me find my history on my YouTube account, which I'm having trouble finding the button. What the hell is that show called? Hang on one sec. Bear with me. Here it is. I saw the ad last night, but people keep recommending it. Season 2 The Expanse. Season 2 is starting really, really soon, and I'm gonna binge watch season 1. But people are basically saying that if you liked Battlestar Galactica, that it's the best sci-fi show of that nature since then. And for me, Battlestar Galactica kind of peaked around season 2.5 when they had the little abridged season, but it was a really goddamn good show for a while. So I'm thinking, at least in the short term, I'm going to scratch my Westworld itch by sidestepping over to The Expanse.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah, I have to still watch a good portion of Battlestar Galactica. I had never finished watching it, so I could even just go backwards and start watching that again too. But yeah, I don't know really. I'm just like, I'll wait and see because HBO is always throwing out really good stuff. And actually, here's an HBO show that people can go back to if they liked Evan Rachel Wood in this, who was excellent. She was awesome as Dolores. And she did the mini-series on HBO a few years ago, the Mildred Pierce. Yeah. That's Todd Haynes, and so it's Todd Haynes. Yeah, and it's exactly like the book. Like, the old film with Joan Crawford's awesome, but
quick question: how long did Evan Rachel Wood date Marilyn Manson? I only found out about that recently, but that seems like such a bizarre, unconventional pairing. But apparently, they were pretty tight for a while.
I want to say like over a year. That actually is why he broke up with his wife and stuff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was just some sort of thing. They got together and they worked together for a little while, like a year, but then they haven't been. And that was a while ago now. That's almost been 10 years. So, you know, and she was younger at that point. Definitely much younger than him with the, you know, May, December romance kind of thing.
Gotcha. Well, as we kind of wrap things up, I guess what I want you to do now, if you can, off the top of your head, kind of rank, in the golden age of TV, kind of like Sopranos onward, rank your top 5 HBO shows, and I guess does Westworld enter your top 5?
Yeah, let's think. Top 5, number 1 would be Sopranos, since I'm from that area. I grew up there, and it's exactly like Jersey was then, which is like they got it perfect. And I think it's one of the most perfect shows ever made. Number 2 for me is The Leftovers, even though it's a newer one. Same thing, where I think it's beautiful filmmaking, beautiful storytelling, and it's incredibly emotional, and very few shows can sustain that sort of emotional content over 2 seasons and make it really interesting and baffling at the same time. Other than that, let's think. The Wire, of course, you got to give it to The Wire on HBO. That it, even though the second season with the dock workers is really annoying, overall it's brilliant.
I would argue that that's my favorite season of The Wire.
Oh
but
my gosh, no way!
I'm in the minority on that, but yeah, I love the second season of The Wire.
Yeah, I'm also a fan of Treme, which like nobody watched. That's another David Simon film, a mini TV show on HBO, which like nobody watched it, but I liked it. It's about New Orleans musicians, and like half of it, it's basically a musical actually, where half of it is just great musical performances, and they gave it a really short ending, and that was unfortunate. And I think Deadwood is definitely, I think that's like my, you know, in the top 5 is Deadwood, because it ended too soon and it was perfect and it was so gritty and all the performances were so well done. The language they used was beautiful and poetic, and I really, really wish they had finished it out, and they're never going to do a TV show, movie for it. So what we have is what we have, and yeah, wonderful stuff.
So does Westworld rearrange your top 5? Because I think you just named 6 or 7. So did it break your top 5 or not?
I don't think it broke my top 5, but I definitely think it's a wonderful, I mean, it's really enjoyable, and the set design is beautiful, and all the actors are wonderful. I mean, there's so many actors in it. There's really like, I mean, there are no, you know, lead actors. It's such an ensemble. Yeah, it really is. So I would say right now it's definitely in the top 10. Doesn't crack the top 5 yet, but it's definitely, it's so wonderfully made. It was so, it's not glossy, but it's majestic. It feels like it does when you're out there, where everything's big and grandiose. So I definitely give it like in the top 10 of just really well made and beautiful shows to watch, and interesting, and it's not overly heady. It's not I really do feel like way too many people got into the game aspect of it, and just enjoy it as a story. Not every story has to be mega elaborate. Maybe it's just a regular story where it's like a whodunit, and now we found out whodunit, and we're gonna move on and to a new story from that, and that's okay to have stories that are totally labyrinthine. We still can have those and still find them enjoyable. So
yeah, they've got a very tough act to follow with their season 2, but I feel like they seem like Lisa Joy and Christopher Nolan both seem to be so on top of their game and understanding what made the show tick, what made it work, and how it's providing commentary about storytelling all at the same time while unfolding and unveiling this great story in itself. But I have to say, if I were going to rank my top 5 HBO shows, I also would put Sopranos at number 1. I would probably put Game of Thrones at number 2, The Wire at number 3, season 1 of True Detective at number 4, and I think I would put Westworld at number 5. But what am I leaving anything out that's crazy? But I think I'm at least in the short term safe with that list. So for me, it does break top 5, and we'll have to kind of like give it some time to marinate to see how I regard it in the days and weeks to come. But yeah, I'm just I'm thrilled that we had this great season. My fall would have been emptier without it, and I just can't wait to see what they do next.
Absolutely, absolutely. Definitely.
Well, Leanne, I can't thank you enough for joining me on my experimental first live stream. And it'll take probably like half an hour or so before this thing kind of like can marinate before I can actually like really post it. But some people have watched it. We at one point we got up to like 18 viewers, so somebody tuned in for a conversation, which is super duper cool. But where can people find you online if they want to talk more about Westworld, your business, sci-fi, just anything? Where can people hunt you down?
You can find me, my website's 1898-house.com. That's where I have my nail company. See, I have cool nails, folks. And we sell nail polish for men, women, any person. So check us out. I'm also on Twitter at 1898 house. And you can find me on my personal one as Leanne Marie K. And so we can hit me up there. We'll talk movies. We'll talk nail polish. It'll be lovely. So yeah.
Beautiful. And if anyone wants to hunt me down, you can find me on Twitter at Colbrax. And please subscribe to my podcast, Wrong Reel. And I'll include all this information in the show notes as well as soon as I post this video for good. But hope y'all enjoyed it. I had a ton of fun doing it. And we just need to find another show, Leanne, that we can sink our teeth into in the very near future. So let's throw out our fishing nets and see what we find.
Sounds good.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to stop the broadcast now, and then I'll give you a shout on Skype just to kind of wrap things up. Talk to you in a bit.
All right, cool.